Hello everyone, welcome to week 7 of IS 688. This week we start module 5 on clustering, which is part of a 2-week module. To give us some direction, we're about now halfway through the semester in week 7 of 14 weeks worth of lecture. Though we have spring break coming up in a couple of weeks, and then there are the final exam ends of the semester, but we only have, I think, about 7 weeks more of actual lecture to go over to cover clustering, recommendation systems, stream processing, and advertising. So we'll slow down a little bit during those modules, since those modules are more sophisticated, more complex kinds of analyses. And now that we have a solid foundation about how to work with the data, we can dive more deeply into extracting useful insights. For these announcements, we'll go over some for the class. The first is that assignment 3 is now due. So assignment 3 covers modules 3 and 4 for dimensionality reduction and similarity. Regarding the medium assignments or the medium posts, so for assignment 1, 20 posts have been submitted to the course publication so far. 13 posts have been submitted for assignment 2, and 6 posts have been submitted for assignment 3. So remember I mentioned last week, I'm not going to grade assignments or posts that have not been submitted to the Medium publication for the class. So at least for assignment 3, this is in track. We have 6 submissions to the course publication and 6 submitted via Canvas, so this is good. But for assignments 1 and 2, there's still some missing content. So Canvas has 25 articles submitted for assignment 1 and 17 articles submitted for assignment 2. Whereas on the Medium publication, we have 20 and 13, so there's some missing there. So if you haven't submitted your posts to the Medium publication, let me know, or tell me why, or submit them. Reach out to me if there's some issue here. Regarding the Medium publications as well, so I have been actively trying to find a grader to help accelerate the process of receiving feedback or getting you feedback. So I now have a TA who's working for me on this. So this should accelerate grading pretty substantially. All the remaining assignment 1 medium posts should be graded by Wednesday as the TA and I sort of focus in on what the priorities are. I communicate to him what my priorities are during grading and the rubrics. After that, assignments 2 and assignments 3 should be graded over spring break and be submitted back to you. And then the cadence for getting you feedback on your Medium posts should accelerate pretty substantially after that, as the TA will be focused on high throughput to get these assessments back to you. Stats-wise, for the course publication, we're doing pretty well. So there are a number of highly viewed articles that have been around. A number of you have received opportunities or requests to be featured. I know at least one article that has been featured on another publication. So I encourage you to explore this opportunity if you can. It's good exposure for you and for your portfolio. But by all means, take time to evaluate or look over the publications that are asking you to be featured, since they make sure that they have like reasonable kinds of content or content that you think is interesting or touches on an audience that you may care about. But in general, I think this kind of thing is good exposure for you. Also, I've put together assignment 4, which covers clustering, module 5. So as with assignment 3, you can use a pre-existing data set here. You can even use the data set you used for assignment 3 on distance metrics, if you like. The idea, though, here is to use the clustering techniques that we'll talk about this week and next week around hierarchical clustering or k-means clustering or something along those lines. And ideally, what you need to do is take some data set, use a k-value or specify some k-value, justify how you came up with that k-value. Maybe it's through optimization, maybe it's because of your familiarity with the domain of the data set, and then explain or describe what clusters mean, what the resulting clustering means for your data set. So identify some clusters and then describe them. If this is in social media, maybe what are the most common hashtags in this cluster if you're looking at hashtags, or who are the users if you're looking at interactions, who are the central users in these clusters, these kinds of things. It's primarily qualitative. Just give us some insight on what you think these clusters mean. The posts, or the rubric rather, covers essentially the same as assignment 3. with some differences specifically for clustering. But the main one here is to describe and justify what you think each cluster in your data set represents or describes based on the K value that you have specified or used, or the method you have for evaluating the number of clusters. Some operations do not require you to pre-specify a K value. That's fine if you use that too. You still need to come up with some description of what you think this K value means once you have it, or why you use the particular method that you've used. As with the distance metrics from assignment 3, K-means and agglomerative clustering, the main clustering approaches that we'll talk about, have implementations in scikit-learn. You are welcome to use those or some other general clustering approach. We'll talk about what some of those options are. In fact, scikit has its own sort of clustering about how you deal with data anyway, so there's some good options here. Regarding the semester project, so your data collection reports have all been turned in. Thank you for that. I'm working on evaluating those while the grader works on evaluating your Medium posts. My objective is to get you back all the feedback for the data collection reports no later than next Wednesday, so you have a couple of weeks to review for the follow-on. So if this is the next, or the data collection report is assignment 2 of the semester project, assignment 3 of the semester project is coming up, so that's the intermediate report, which lets you talk about where you are, what you've tried, how much progress you've made, any issues you've encountered. This, I know, may not be a fun aspect because you're potentially down in the weeds trying to work through your data, but that's kind of the point. So with the intermediate report being due in 3 weeks, that's March 24th, you'll have essentially all of April to get everything together for your final report and final presentation on your project. Regarding Module 5 and lecture, so there are 2 weeks in this module, as I mentioned. Week 1, that's this week, we'll do 4 learning objectives. The first is to compare and contrast 2 approaches for hierarchical clustering, which is a relatively straightforward kind of clustering that we'll talk about or use to motivate clustering problems. Then describe how you represent a cluster that is composed of many points. If we want to do calculations to evaluate which 2 clusters are the closest, or which cluster a single point, a new point, is closest to, how do we represent that cluster? Once we have that, how do we calculate distances between clusters? And then as we're building clusters, how do we know when we should stop clustering? So there will be a couple of things that we'll discuss here. And then next week, we'll move on from hierarchical clustering to talk more about K-means and how K-means clustering works. K-means is a very popular clustering algorithm. There's a lot of optimization. Then we'll talk about 2 strategies for initializing your clusters in K-means. How do you know or identify or come up with ways to figure out where your initial clusterings start? And then we'll talk about strategies for selecting the number of clusters, since that's such a majorly common question that comes up with things like K-means or topic modeling or community identification or community detection. Knowing the number of clusters you're looking for is a very common problem. And then, as with all the modules, there is a Module 5 discussion forum. If you have any questions about K-means or hierarchical clustering or anything like that, feel free to post there. For next week, so Chapter 7 is the section that we're working on, or the chapter we're working on for this module. This week we'll have covered 7.1 and 7.2. For next week, you should have some familiarity with 7.3 and 7.4, where we talk about K-means. Also, your assignment 3 is now due, so be working on that. Assignment 4 is assigned, but it's not due for 4 weeks. But you should be thinking about how you can use clustering in some of the data sets that you're working on. And then the semester project intermediate report is due in 3 weeks. If you have any questions about any of this, either about the module or the project or anything along those lines, there's a forum for you to post there. I'll get back to you, or send me an email.